Have you ever been to a town, village, truck stop, gas station, diner, etc. during a road trip that just didn't feel right? Like time seemed to pass differently there? Or the people there gave you the creeps? What was your experience there? Part 2. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Gary, Indiana. I got off the highway to get gas. Driving through the city was like a post-apocalyptic movie complete with burned-out cars. Crazy guy in underwear walking down the middle of the street with a baseball bat, and all the windows were broken or boarded up. I stopped at a gas station, and then guy came out and said, "Get back on the highway, it's not safe here." I had enough gas to get to a safer rest stop to refuel. This was around 1994-95. I was traveling through Arkansas with my friend in the army. He was a big old black dude, and I was a medium-height white dude. Everyone at McDonald's literally stopped and just stared at us until we ordered food and left. It was super weird, and we made sure to bypass the place on the way back to post. Yes, stopped in a no-name town in Texas for gas. Bunch of guys wearing nothing but denim hanging out in front of the gas station. Denim, cowboy hats, cowboy boots. It wasn't just a lot of people. Everyone was wearing that. Their drawls were so thick I could barely understand what they were saying to one another. A lot of hooting and hollering. About 50 yards away, there was a guy sitting under a tree. He was wearing a black and white striped jumpsuit and was chained to a tree by a shackle on his leg. Didn't see any law enforcement around. Maybe they dropped him off. A girl with huge tits, 1.5 arms, and an eye patch complimented my car and smiled at me when I was pumping gas. I saw a cow trotting down the side of the road. No one seemed to be chasing it. The fact it was twilight seemed to make everything surreal. I unasked myself from that place as quickly as I could. On a road trip with my parents in the mid-90s, we spent the night in a small city. My parents picked it simply because it was roughly halfway from our origin to our destination, and the hotel was a reasonable rate. Pulling off of the interstate, it was clearly a post-industrial city. Big factory buildings everywhere, all of them closed up and fenced off. The hotel attendant was very slow, and our room wasn't much to speak of, but it was just an overnight. We looked in the phone book for restaurants, copied down the address of 3 places, and set off for dinner. We couldn't find the first place we got on the right street and followed it from one end of town to the other with no sign of it. The second place we found, but was closed for good. The third place looked absolutely awful from the outside, and we didn't even go in. The town felt completely abandoned. My parents decided to go to the hotel restaurant. The hotel restaurant was almost empty, except for 2 tables of ATF agents, identifiable because they were all wearing their navy blue t-shirts with yellow ATF on the back. Not surprisingly, the restaurant was out of nearly everything on the menu. A few minutes after sitting down, the fire alarm went off. Nobody moved. Not the ATF guys, not the restaurant staff. A few minutes later, it stopped. Then a few minutes after that, it started again. Again, nobody moved. The fire department rolled up, but nobody seemed concerned. The waitress said that the fire alarm system always went off a few times a day. We managed to spend the night. The fire alarm went off a few more times, but not while we were sleeping. We left as soon as we could. Wife and I were driving up the Blue Mountains, big mountain range in Australia, to visit friends who were staying at a holiday place up there. It's crazy foggy in the late afternoon or early evening, so we can't see much as we're going up. But it's pretty much a straight run up, so we take it slow and pull over sometimes when the fog gets too thick to give it a minute to lighten a bit. Super creepy, but nothing weird, that's just how it is. We stayed the night at friends and drove back down the next afternoon, lovely and sunny. We drove through a cute little town that hugged the sides of the main road, so you could see and drive straight through it without turning or hitting any major intersections. My wife said, "Oh, are we going home a different way?" No, we were not. There was basically an entire small town we'd driven through the night before right near the house, and we never saw a single indication of it. We hadn't seen any lights, street lights, other cars, welcome to Spookyville population 1 signs, anything. We had pulled over to check the map, pre-smartphones, to make sure we hadn't missed the turnoff, and we would have been practically in the middle of the town. It's amazing how something so big can disappear in the fog so easily. Early evening, and not one house light? Mole people, I reckon. I know there's a logical explanation, but it's 20 years later, and I still think Nan got going back up there. So one year, my friends and I went to a convention, and it was a 9-hour drive there. We left late Wednesday night due to one friend having to work later than she thought and didn't get on the road until about 8 p.m. We called and made sure our room would be ready for early check-in on Thursday morning, since we expected to be arriving around 5 to 6 in the morning, and I was going to have to crash for a few hours, since I was going to have to drive the whole way because of some legal nonsense about my car insurance, basically meaning my friends could not drive my car. And honestly, we only took my car because I had a minivan, and there were 8 of us going, including myself, and only my car could fit everyone, so we didn't have to split into 2 or 3 separate cars. Anyway, it gets to be around 2 a.m., and I decide to stop is in order. Everyone else is fast asleep as we pull into this stop on the turnpike. We were in Ohio, and stops on the turnpike are usually pretty big. Usually there's a bathroom, 3 to 4 fast food places, and a general shop with maps, snacks, books, souvenirs, etc. See a few other cars, so I know there's people there. Probably the fast food workers keeping the place open 24/7 with a skeleton crew, and I park right up front next to the disabled parking spaces so I don't have to go far in the dark. I reached over and woke up my friend in the passenger seat, making sure she was really up and would stay up for a few minutes while I went inside so someone awake in the car knew what was going on. Inside I go, intending to just use the bathroom and grab some coffee, maybe food from a fast food place. I went to the bathroom first and didn't pay attention to the fast food places, and the bathroom trip was uneventful. But when I got back out into the main court area, I just felt off, like someone was watching me, but I couldn't see anyone. 2 of the places were shut down, and another 2 were open, lights on and all, but there was no one behind the counters. I went up to the counters and called out, but no one answered. Even the little general store was empty despite having the lights on and such. I ended up getting some cheap coffee out of a vending machine and a second cup to go, and getting out of there. The whole time I was just creeped out, and I felt that something was very wrong. When I got back out to the parking lot, I saw the other cars were gone, and only my little minivan was sitting there, and when I got in, I asked my awake friend if she'd seen the other cars leave. She asked what cars, and I told her there were cars parked when we pulled in and that I assumed belonged to the employees. She was adamant there had been no cars, and she thought I was seeing things and asked if I was okay to drive. Still to this day, do not know what happened. I know it was late, but I've always been a night owl, and I wasn't even that tired at the time. I only stopped because I knew the next rest area was over an hour out, and didn't want to have been driving that long without a proper stop. So I'm fairly certain I wasn't seeing things. Plus, I know those kinds of stops always have the general store and at least one fast food place open, and there should have been people there. So I have no idea why there weren't, and I can't explain the creepy feeling I got while inside. We drove on, and the next stop around 4 a.m. was a similar place that did have people working, and I got more coffee and some breakfast from them with a few of my friends who were a little more awake at the time. But man, that one rest stop was just creepy. I am a skeptical person, but this one experience I had in Berlin still confuses me to this day. Me and my girlfriend were on holiday walking through central Berlin, a weekday morning. The streets were fairly busy, a typical day, when we turned down a long wide street with large buildings on either side. As we walked down, we noticed it was very quiet and that there was no one else on the street at all, which was strange in itself considering it was 10 to 11 a.m. As we carried on walking, I can't really describe what happened, but I noticed that the buildings we were walking past weren't actually real, but like movie set buildings. The windows and doors looked normal from a distance, but up close, they were way too big to be normal. I just felt really uneasy the whole time, but we didn't say anything until we turned off the street and back into the hustle and bustle of Berlin. I have absolutely no idea what happened at all, but my girlfriend said she felt or seen exactly the same thing. It was like we stepped into a different world for a few minutes. Totally bizarre. I have 2 stories like this. The first one was an absolutely creepy experience, and the second one was weird, but I didn't feel threatened. First story. A friend and I were driving in a thunderstorm of epic proportions. We couldn't see the road ahead of us, so we pulled over to a diner in a tiny town and decided we'd wait inside for the storm to pass and order some food. From the outside, it looked really lively. People were talking, laughing, and eating. As soon as we walked through the door, the whole place went silent, and every single person stopped what they were doing and just stared at us. Dozens of eyeballs fixated on us. We ordered our food and ate it, and left as soon as the weather had cleared up a bit. We were there for maybe an hour, and it stayed completely silent the entire time, and the customers kept looking our way, not discreetly. Second story. Another time, I was on a road trip. It was the middle of the night, and we were getting tired, so we decided to stop in the next town. There had been no sign of civilization for miles, and we finally came across a small town with a B&B. The woman running the place was odd but very kind. The house felt different somehow, but so did the whole town. It kind of felt like I'd entered a different dimension, if that makes any sense. Anyway, I go to bed, and the next morning I wake up and decide to walk around the town a bit before we hit the road. Again, the whole place felt like a different world, like it was not part of the earth we normally know. The people living there were tending to their gardens, walking their dogs, etc., and it felt like slow-mo. There were 2 shops in town and no other businesses. By going into the shops and looking around and taking with one of the shop owners, I found out the whole town was a pagan town where every single citizen worshipped a goddess of fertility, as in human fertility, but also fertility of their crops. The stores were packed with items that can be used for rituals and other various items like statuettes representing the goddess. They seemed to be hardcore worshippers. Their town wasn't on the map, and I never found it again. It was a really surreal experience. Weird. I was on a road trip to go to Tallahassee with 2 of my cousins and my mom. Like halfway between A and B, the driver, he has to go pee, so we decided to stop in the next no-name rest stop settlement. As soon as we drove in, I immediately felt something was wrong. The cars that were driving were all banged up and looked like they came straight from the 70s. Confederate flags in a couple of places, ran down shanty-looking houses, lots of Confederate flags. The American flags that were around were pretty banged up and or torn. The people stared at us as we drove past them, and everyone just looked dead inside. Honestly, if someone told me that there was a Klan rally right up the street, I would 100% believe them. That's the kind of vibe I got from this place. So, my cousin pulls into this decent-looking rest stop gas station and jogs into the bathroom, while my mom and my other cousin were knocked out. I decided to go into the shop with the intentions of going in, getting a snack, and getting out. As soon as I walk in, it feels like time stopped, and everyone that I can see is staring at me. It felt like something out of a horror movie, not gonna lie. Luckily for me, there were a pile of apples near the door, so I moved my way there, and then I noticed the few people around me stopped dead in their tracks just to look at me. For example, their hands were still on the items, and this man even stopped reading his little cereal box to stare at me. Since I'm black, this place wasn't sitting well with me at all. I put back the apple I was holding, and I casually walked out. No need to cause a scene or anything, without getting anything. Fuck that place. When my cousin came back, we booked it the F out of there. Yes, it was a very tiny town in Kansas. Updated, had originally said Nebraska. Felt like I was at the start of a zombie movie. Even the fucking air was wrong. What did I do? Shift nervously from one foot to another while I waited for the damn dog to do his business. The only place that had any sign of life was the Subway sandwich shop, and my wife decided she wanted lunch. I was fucking sure that was the start of my "so this is how I die" train of thought. No zombie appeared, but I made my wife eat in the car, and we got the fuck out of there pronto. It was a little past midnight, and I offered to drive a friend who was visiting with me to her parents' house where she was staying. They live in a smaller town outside of mine, about a half-hour drive away. I'd been there enough times that I didn't need any type of directions, just a reminder of where to turn off into her neighborhood because it was hard to tell with it being dark outside. Now, allow me to clear up a little information. I was not under the influence of anything, alcohol, drugs, nothing. I wasn't even that tired. Her neighborhood was just off of a long road in the woods that came straight off a major highway, so it wasn't in the boonies or anything, but out of the city. To get out of the city I live in to where she lives, you pass under a newly constructed toll road that is a loop around the city. It's large and can't be missed. You have to either go under it or over it to get back into the city, and it has those huge highway lights all around it, so it wouldn't be easy to pass without noticing. So anyways, I dropped her off and head back the way I came. It's only a couple of turns from the long road I mentioned before, so I go back without even thinking about it. I've driven this way several times. I head back on the long road a little ways, and I'm suddenly at a stop sign. except the long road doesn't have stop signs if you're traveling on it. And at the stop sign, I'm facing a boulevard with cookie-cutter middle-class homes I have never seen before. There are lots of homes like that in the area, but these had an eeriness to them. They were not lit by any kind of streetlights or anything, but were perfectly visible in the night, and they all seemed empty. There might have been cars and driveways, but not a single light was on in the 2 rows or dozens of houses. It was as if all the life that may have lived in this neighborhood had vanished. Obviously, I did not go down this boulevard. I got a little teary-eyed from the sheer feeling this place gave me. I turned to my left. Somehow, I made it to a neighborhood that I did recognize. I could also see the lights from the highway nearby, so I headed towards them. Eventually, I made it onto the same highway that I took from town, but something strange occurred to me. I never passed over the toll road. The series of neighborhoods in that area typically had bridges over the toll road that connected the residential area and kept the sounds of vehicles down and away from the quiet homes, but I never passed over it. The entire drive home felt off. Until I got to a certain part of the city, each sign looked a little different. I only saw another car on the road when I did get further into the city. To this day, I've yet to see that boulevard at that stop sign. I don't know how I got there, but I don't ever want to be there alone again.